What a day in court today. This murder case against 21-year-old David Anthony Burke, the TikTok singer known as D4VD. David, this has finally gone to a preliminary hearing, and that's after we covered 3 separate status conferences wondering if this case would eventually move forward. Well, today it finally has. And I got to start with the most graphic portion of the testimony today. We did hear from 3 witnesses called by the prosecution. 2 of them were investigators, and one of them from the LAPD had the task of describing what he found when he was called to the Hollywood tow yard last September. That was, of course, the day the victim, 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez, was found in the front trunk of the defendant's Tesla. So we've seen the descriptions of what happened to her. We've seen the autopsy reports. We've reported on this additional felony charge against David, stating that he dismembered her corpse after he allegedly stabbed her to death. But Chris, today for the first time, we actually in the courtroom saw photos of that portion of the investigation. We actually saw the victim's remains in cadaver bags, still in the front trunk of that Tesla. It was something I don't think I have the words to describe. Reporters sitting in the courtroom actually stopped typing for a moment. There was a second where it felt like everybody just froze. And there was this too. For the first time today, we actually saw the parents of the victim, the mother and father of Celeste. They were both sitting in the courtroom. They were sitting directly in front of me. They were about 3 rows ahead of me. And I could see the victim's mother, Mercedes, just bowing her head down and crying when those evidentiary photos were shown to the courtroom. But I do want to lay out what else happened. So I do want to start with the very first thing.
You already know what I'm about to say. You've seen it 100 times before. The guy with everything to lose sits there, stone-faced, while they show the pictures. And the family, the real victims, they're in the back, falling apart. That's the image. That's the story they don't want you to think too hard about. And look, here we are again, inside a Los Angeles courtroom. The preliminary hearing for David Anthony Burke, you know him as D4VD, kicked off with a moment so grotesque that even the reporters stopped typing. That's not hyperbole. That's what the woman from NBC said. She was sitting right there. She watched the whole thing go down. And when prosecutors put those photos up on the screen, the cadaver bags, the remains, the trunk of that Tesla, she said everybody in that room just froze. Everybody except the guy on trial. Because here's the thing though. While Celeste Rivas Hernandez's mother sat 3 rows in front of the press, head bowed, crying into her hands, David Burke was reportedly bored, uninterested.
Proceedings. So they called 3 witnesses to the stand today. There was an LA County Sheriff's Department deputy, a senior deputy, and this is way back. This was back when Celeste was still alive, and she was reported missing in her hometown in Lake Elsinore. This is a different county. This is in Riverside County. And apparently that sheriff's office contacted LA County to go and investigate. So we heard from the senior deputy who actually went to the defendant's house up in the Hollywood Hills looking for this missing girl. Celeste would have been 13 at the time. We saw body camera footage of this senior deputy and his partner being let into that house by David, having a conversation with him, and then being shown photos on David's phone of Celeste. David said, yeah, he knew her. He met her online at the end of 2021. And he claimed to deputies that he hadn't seen her in months, but he pulled up her yearbook photo and said she told him she was 18 and not 13. So that was the first witness we heard from today. After that, Prosecutors called up an LAPD detective from their robbery and homicide division. This detective was the one who was sent to the Hollywood tow yard after David's Tesla was towed there. And because of a foul stench of decomposition, police were called and they found what ended up being Celeste's remains. We ended the day by hearing from a third witness.
Like he was waiting for a bus, not listening to the details of how a 14-year-old girl's body was cut into pieces and stuffed into a car. I need you to stay with me here because this is where the story gets even uglier. We all knew the system was broken. You know, just like I know, that when you're young and talented and making millions, the rules bend. They always have. But this is something else entirely. Now, let's talk about the timeline because the timeline is everything. Back in 2022, David was 18 years old and getting famous off Fortnite streams and sad boy pop songs. You remember the song. You probably heard it in a commercial or a video game trailer. That was the guy, and prosecutors say that's the same year he met Celeste. She was 11.
We've been covering all aspects of the David case since the story broke last year, but this is a story actually that goes back years before then. So what we want to do is clarify, simplify. This is a full timeline of all developments, all major developments, the investigation, the key dates that prosecutors claim these alleged crimes were committed. So this is going to be everything you need to know. This is a comprehensive look based on reporting and prosecutors' allegations. And when I say alleged crimes, by the way, I mean that David is currently charged with first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, and unlawful mutilation of human remains, all in connection with the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. So with that in mind, here we go. Full timeline of this entire story. Now, I said this goes back years before, right? January 2022, to be exact. According to the prosecution, in their pre-trial brief, this is when David and then 11-year-old Celeste first met. The details of that meeting, not entirely clear. I'm sure that's going to be explored at a trial. Then you fast forward to November 2023, because that is when prosecutors claim David and Celeste began a sexual relationship when she was just 13 years old and he was 18 years old. And how do they know that? What is their apparent evidence to prove that allegation? You go back to the pretrial brief, it says from the evidence list, quote, the description of photographs depicting the victim naked, as well as while she was engaged with defendant in sexual activity when she was 13. As this evidence constitutes child sexual abuse material CSAM, the photographs themselves will not be presented. While all possible charges that could be proven were not filed, the CSAM is proof of their ongoing sexual relationship while the victim was 13 and 14 years old. By the way, we did a whole
11. You and I both know what that means. You don't meet an 11-year-old and start messaging her for months unless you know exactly what you're doing. But of course, they didn't tell the cops that when the cops showed up. When the Riverside County Sheriff's Department came calling in February 2024 after Celeste's family reported her missing, David told them he had no idea she was a minor. He said she told him she was 18. And then, get this, he pulled up her yearbook photo on his phone. You don't keep a yearbook photo of a girl you barely know. You don't keep a yearbook photo of a girl you think is 18. That's not how any of this works. And you and I both know that. But here's the part that should make your blood boil. After law enforcement told him she was 13, he kept going. He drove to Lake Elsinore. He paid a junior high school student $1,000 to deliver a secret cell phone to Celeste so they could keep talking. $1,000 to a 7th grader. Think about that. He knew exactly how wrong this was. He knew enough to hide it, to use a middleman, to create layers between him and that little girl. And the system? They let him walk. They told him she was 13. And they left. Now, the money. They always follow the money, don't they? $79,868.
He did primarily accounting work, financial work for a record label that worked with David when he first came to LA from Texas. And a lot of the questioning there, a lot of the cross-examination from both prosecutors and defense attorneys had to do with management of David's finances. Who is paying the bills? Who is reviewing expenses? And just how much money was involved in this operation around this budding artist with what's been described as a multi-million-dollar music career ahead of him. Well, let me give you the numbers this witness laid out. He says between 2023 and the end of 2025, David raked in gross earnings of $10 to $11.5 million. And he says that record label head made anywhere from $3.5 to $4 million off of just David. Now, why is this relevant? This goes back to that first-degree murder charge and the special circumstances around that charge. There are 3 of them. Those special circumstances mean this is eligible for the death penalty here in California, even though California technically halted executions back in 2019. So one of those 3 special circumstances include murder for financial gain. Prosecutors allege David killed this 14-year-old because she threatened to expose their illegal relationship, and that would have threatened his career.
A business associate took the stand and laid it all out. Between 2023 and the end of 2025, David grossed between $10 and $11.5 million. $10 million. Off music, off tours, off endorsements. And according to that same witness, the head of his record label made $3.5 to $4 million just from him. So you're looking at a guy with a rocket attached to his back, a debut album coming out April 25th, 2025, and a 14-year-old girl who just sent him a message saying, and I'm quoting the prosecution here, "All we do is have sex and just hang out. Man, I want more than that for myself." And then she threatened to expose him. She said she would destroy his career. She said she would end everything he'd built. April 22nd, 2025. That's the night everything changed. Prosecutors say they argued for hours. She was jealous. She was hurt. He'd led her to believe they had a future, and she found out he was seeing other women. So she threatened him with the one thing he valued more than anything else. And the very next night, April 23rd, at around 10:10 p.m., an Uber drops her off at his Hollywood Hills home. She walks in, and she never walks out. 08931.
25. April 22nd, 2025. This is the night before prosecutors claim, authorities claim, David allegedly killed Celeste. So April 22nd, 2025. The prosecution's brief says that the defendant and the victim engaged in a lengthy argument described in detail in their text messages. The messages revealed the victim's jealousy over defendant's relationships with other women, as defendant led her to believe they had a future together. She became extremely upset and threatened to disclose damaging information about her relationship with defendant to end his career and destroy his life. Defendant's first studio album was due to be released on April 25th, 2025. He had an emerging multi-million-dollar career already in progress. He also had multiple product endorsements, which were highly profitable. April 23rd, 2025. This is the day that prosecutors believe Celeste was killed and all of her cellular activity ceased. That is according to prosecution. And going to their brief, it says, quote, at approximately 8:40 p.m. on April 23rd, 2025, defendant sent an Uber to transport the victim from her Lake Elsinore home to his residence. Uber records showing defendant's transaction where he ordered an Uber to pick up the victim from her Lake Elsinore home and transport her to his residence the night of April 23rd, 2025. They communicated before and during her Uber ride, which dropped her off at defendant's Hollywood Hills home around 10:10 p.m. At approximately 10:30 p.m., defendant sent text messages to the victim inquiring where she was. The people contend this was part of defendant's premeditated plan to cover up the murder, as she was already dead by this time. Knowing he had to silence the victim before she ruined his music career as she had threatened, very soon after the arrival at his home, defendant stabbed the victim to death multiple times and stood by while she bled out. At no time did he call law enforcement or 911 or take her to an emergency room.
By 10:30 p.m., he's sending her text messages asking where she is. But the people, that's what they called them in the brief. The people contend she was already dead by then. He's staging a cover-up while her body is still warm. And the reason for that? Well, you'll see. He got in his Tesla that night and drove north to Santa Barbara County. He threw away her things. He destroyed evidence. And then he came back the next morning and went to a radio interview to promote his album like nothing happened. Like he hadn't just ended a child's life. But wait, because it gets worse. May 1st, 2025. He orders 2 chainsaws from Amazon. He uses the fake name Victoria Mendez because he knew exactly what he was doing. May 5th, He orders a body bag, heavy-duty laundry bags, and a blue inflatable pool. That pool, and I need you to remember this, that blue pool is the reason they can place him at the crime scene. Because when the medical examiner later examined Celeste's remains, they found small blue plastic fragments embedded in her limbs. And the LAPD's trace analysis unit matched those fragments to that exact blue pool. 42,383.
Financial motive, timing, goes to that, right? Now, before he left for the tour, the prosecution alleges at some point he did the following, quote, "Defendant took horrifying measures to destroy and discard the victim's body. After placing her body into the blue inflatable pool to prevent her blood from spilling onto his garage floor, defendant used a chainsaw and perhaps other tools to cut off her limbs. Small blue plastic fragments were found embedded in the victim's remains, which were collected by the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Department. The fragments were analyzed by the LAPD's Forensic Science Division Trace Analysis Unit. An expert was able to make a physical fit match from the blue fragments to the blue inflatable pool purchased by defendant in May 2025. In order to distance himself from the victim, he amputated her left ring and pinky fingers because her ring finger contained a tattoo of his name. Her fingers have not been recovered. Defendant then placed her head and torso into the cadaver bag he purchased. He placed her limbs into a garbage bag, which he deposited into his front trunk, laying the cadaver bag on top. For several weeks or possibly months, defendant left the victim's body to decompose inside his Tesla. August 27th.
He cut her body up on that pool. He used a chainsaw. He severed her limbs. And then he placed her head and torso in a cadaver bag, threw her legs and arms in garbage bags, and shoved everything into the front trunk of his Tesla. And then he left her there. For weeks, maybe months. He went on tour. He performed at Coachella. He posted on Instagram. And all the while, his Tesla sat in a tow yard, eventually, with a decomposing 14-year-old girl in the front. The smell was so bad that the tow yard manager noticed the flies before he even opened the trunk. You already know what I'm about to say next. Because the system didn't catch him. The neighbors noticed the smell. The friends noticed the smell. Business associates noticed the smell. And David allegedly told them it was his bathroom. He said he apologized for how his house smelled. He lied to everyone. And here's the part that should shake you. On September 8th, 2025, one day after Celeste would have turned 15, the police finally opened that trunk.
Fox 5, the position of the tires on the Tesla was marked by authorities, so it's parked there and it's now being noticed. September 3rd, according to Fox 5, a parking citation is issued for the Tesla. September 5th, the Tesla is towed and impounded in a Hollywood tow lot. September 8th, the day after what would have been Celeste's 15th birthday, her decomposed, dismembered body is reportedly found in the front trunk of the Tesla. Prosecution alleges that the manager of the tow yard where the Tesla had been impounded noted the strong smell of decay and the presence of flies coming from the vehicle. He notified the Los Angeles Police Department. Hollywood auto detectives, through departmental resources, determined that the Tesla was registered to the defendant. At the tow yard, LAPD detectives opened the Tesla's front storage compartment and observed a black cadaver bag covered in insects. Inside the bag, they discovered a severely decomposed head and torso. A plastic garbage bag beneath the black cadaver bag contained the dismembered arms and legs. However, the victim's ring and pinky fingers on her left hand had been amputated and were not found in the Tesla.
Her fingers
9th,
were missing.
David,
Her left ring finger and pinky were amputated because she had a tattoo of his name on her ring finger. He removed his name from her body. And still, they didn't charge him. Not until April 2026, almost a full year after she died. This is not normal. This is not how a human being behaves when their life is on the line. You and I both know that if you were innocent, if you had nothing to do with any of this, you'd be terrified. You'd be fighting. You'd be crying. You'd be something. But bored? That's not boredom. That's something else. That's the mask of someone who already knows how this ends. Who's been told by high-priced attorneys that he's going to walk, who has millions of dollars and a team of people whose only job is to make this go away. And you know what the defense is going to say? They're already laying the groundwork. They asked the judge to let him appear unshackled because the handcuffs might sway the jury.
The judge even began preliminary hearing proceedings. She wanted to address a defense motion that was filed back on July 10th. Now, there's been a lot of coverage about this. We talked about it this morning, how David's team filed this request for him to appear in court unshackled. Now, their argument is if jurors see him, handcuffed, there is an appearance of guilt. There is an appearance that he may be a dangerous individual. And that could threaten, they claim, the impartiality of the jury members who are tasked with deciding his fate. So they went back and forth over that today. The judge decided on this. She says the defendant, David, can actually be unshackled in court, but she did allow his handcuffs to be removed. And she says that is going to help facilitate the passing of notes, which is permissible between David and his defense attorneys. So they implemented that this morning. They uncuffed his hands, but his waist and his feet still remain shackled. So they got that out of the way. And then very promptly, they started.
They're already worried about
preliminary
optics,
hearing.
not about evidence. Not about the 14-year-old girl with his name tattooed on her finger. Not about the chainsaws or the body bags or the blue pool with her skin still stuck to it. They're worried about how he looks. And that, right there, is the reason we don't trust the system. Here's what you need to do. Go find the prosecution's pretrial brief. It's in the public record. It's a document you can read with your own eyes. It lays out everything I just told you. The messages, the purchases, the timeline, the chainsaws. Read it, and then ask yourself one question. If this was your daughter, would you have let him sit there bored? Or would you have wanted somebody, anybody, to see him for what he is? Like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the hidden case file. We follow the evidence because nobody else will.